morning. Welcome to Law Power Hour. Today, I'm privileged to have Regina Thomas back. Regina, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I'm always excited when she comes on the air because she has such an infectious smile. She's so energetic, she's so happy, and she has so much to talk about. I understand you're running for the third circuit again.
Yes, I am. I will be on the ballot in November. I'm running for Wayne County Circuit Court Judge, and there are 3 open seats. I'm hoping to earn support of the public so that I can get one of those seats.
I know, but you're a woman of professional experience, and your experience as a lawyer, you're a trailblazer, which is really important. You've done a lot for our community, and I want to thank you for all the work you've done through legal aid and through all the programs that you've been involved in. I've never attended an expungement program where I haven't seen you there working.
I appreciate that. I'm passionate about making sure that the community has access to justice. And so, that's what I've done throughout my career. Just that every job that I've had has been about making sure people have access to our system in a meaningful way.
Well, today I had sent you a note because I thought it was really important because we can get off in so many different areas of the law. I wanted to talk about indigent defense reform. And I want our listeners really to pay close attention to this because we actually have a set of guidelines. Is that correct?
Yes, we have a movement underway in our state where we are looking at how we are providing representation to poor people. And this movement started in 2007 when the NLADA commissioned a report about what was going on here in Michigan, and unfortunately it was entitled Michigan Race to the Bottom. So when the Supreme Court decided that people who couldn't afford attorneys were required to have one appointed, Michigan was at the forefront. We jumped right out there and we started setting up systems. We put systems in place to provide attorneys for under-resourced people. But unfortunately, over the last 60-something years, we've not kept up with our obligation under the Constitution.
Well, the constitutional right to counsel came
Yes.
about as a result of Gideon v. Wainwright.
Yes.
Right. Now, I remember Gideon's trumpet. When they blew the trumpet, it was really an
Yes.
important decision.
Yes.
And what they were talking about is the Sixth Amendment guarantee of the right to counsel.
Right.
And, when your Miranda rights are read to anyone, they talk about the right to counsel. If you watch and I hate to use the term, but I'll just straight up call it a cop show on TV.
Any cop show, yes.
And you get arrested, all they talk about is your right to counsel. Well, there's a difference between right to counsel and a right to effective counsel.
Right.
And that's what your commission has done.
Well, not my commission, the state's commission.
Yeah, but you testified and you're
Yes,
involved in it.
yes.
I mean,
So, yeah, I did. I had an opportunity to work with the Michigan Campaign for Justice some years back when we were in the process of trying to get legislation passed. And so that was an uphill battle. It required work on both sides of the aisle to get legislation passed because a lot of people, when they looked at indigent defense reform, the response that we were receiving was, well, these are criminals. Why do we want to spend our taxpayer dollars on criminals? And so we had to really reframe the issue and put it out front in front of people and say, this is for all of our citizens. Any one of us could be charged with a crime, and we're all innocent until proven guilty. We all stand before the court cloaked in innocence. And so we have an obligation to all of our citizens to provide adequate representation. And so we had to start to reframe the conversation and look at public safety issues and look at wrongful convictions. So legislation was passed. It ended up being an unfunded mandate because we did not get appropriations for the defense system in our state. We did get a commission. So now we have an Indigent Defense Commission that is out there. They've created some standards of practice for attorneys that have been accepted, and now they're working with the individual counties. We have 83, by the way, in Michigan, and so each county is providing indigent defense in a different way. So they're working with the individual counties to figure out how we're going to provide effective, adequate representation to under-resourced people in our community.
one of the issues that I was reading about is contact between indigents and their appointed counsel.
Yes.
Because if you're incarcerated and you can't post a bond, it's easy if your appointed counsel is following the rules
Mhm.
to meet with your counsel.
Right.
But if you're released on personal recognizance, in other words, where you don't have to post a bond, then it's a responsibility of your appointed counsel to get to you or have you get into his or her office so that you get the lay of the land, you get to know each other, you find out about the case. You know what kind of defense you have to put up. You know what kind of witnesses you have to meet with and what you have to do.
Right, yeah. Defendants are supposed to be a part of the process. If you're a defendant, you're supposed to be a part of working up your case. Because the attorney isn't gonna know if you don't tell them who was there, if you have an alibi. You know, you have to go over what your testimony is gonna look like. So, absolutely, defendants are supposed to be an integral part of the defense that's presented for them. So, you know, I don't want it to sound like I'm, you know, coming down on attorneys that do this work. There are attorneys that are out there that are doing indigent defense work, they're taking court assignments, they're working for the public defender's office, they're passionate about the work that they do, and they're competent. I think that what is happening a lot of times is that the resources simply are not there. In Wayne County, for our indigent defense system, the fee schedule has not changed in 20 years.
Now, listeners, listen to this. You think lawyers make a lot of money? These lawyers who are defending cases, they're making $40,000 a year, and it costs anywhere from $25,000 to $40,000 a year to go to law school.
Right.
And that's a fact. So they're not really making any money for doing this work, but they're doing this work because they believe in what they're doing.
Absolutely.
But you need effective counsel. You don't need wholesale representation. And let me give you an example of wholesale representation. You're an indigent, you're charged with a crime, you never meet with your lawyer. You go down to the courthouse, John Doe meets up with Henry the lawyer or Sally the lawyer, and they talk for 5 minutes, and they come back and say, well, I got a deal for you. If you plead to this, we'll get rid of this. Well, that deal may be the worst thing in the world for you for the rest of your life, because then you'll have a conviction on your record.
Right. So, you know, and I deal with returning citizens. So over the course of the last 22 years, I've done work with returning citizens. And it is very, very difficult for someone that has a record to get employment, to get housing. If they've spent any amount of time away from home, coming home and getting something as simple as an ID can be difficult and a daunting task. You know, getting a driver's license, you know, if they haven't had the foresight to contact the friend of the court and have their child support stopped. So, you know, there are all these other things that go along with not having proper indigent defense reform or a system in place in our community, and we all pay for it at the end of the day.
Yeah, for example, you pointed out to me this morning, and I have had Bill Proctor on in the past, dealing with innocent victims who've been locked up, incarcerated for years, about an individual who was locked up for 30 years.
Yes.
And it was a matter of, you can tell our audience
And
about
so this gentleman was wrongfully convicted. The situation was one that someone was killed, and the testimony at his trial was that the bullets that were entered into evidence at his trial, the testimony was that the bullets came from his mother's gun. And an expert looked at those bullets, and this is largely why he is now free, looked at the bullets and was able to discern that the bullets never entered a body. That's one thing. The other aspect of it is that those bullets did not come from his mother's gun. So, you know, I wonder in circumstances like that, how different this gentleman's life would have turned out if he had the opportunity to have an expert of his own, to look at that evidence, to present testimony at trial to rebut what was being put on by the prosecutor. So in that instance, we have two problems. First, we have a public safety issue because we don't know if the person that actually committed that crime was ever convicted of anything else. That person could likely still be out on the street committing crimes. The other issue is that now we have to pay this man back for the 30 years of his life that he lost. So that's $50,000 a year plus some. And that comes out of the taxpayer's pocket. Wouldn't it be a lot easier if we spent that money on the front end of our system to provide adequate defense and resources for the attorneys that are undertaking this work? We can deal with the public safety issue, we can deal with the wrongful conviction issues, and I think at the end of the day, we save taxpayer dollars.
Now, as I understand, the new commission reviewing the indigent representation issues also talks about technology.
Yes, Yes, the use of technology. And, so DNA, I mean, we have all of this technology now that's being used, but on the prosecution side. And let me be the first to say, prosecutors work very, very hard. I did that work. I did that work, and Wayne County is a very, very busy prosecutor's office, and in some regards, they're under-resourced as well. But on the other hand, having access to technology and experts on the defense side, I think bolsters our system. We have a responsibility to maintain the integrity of our system, the lawyers that are involved in it, the judges that are involved in it. And when we don't give people the opportunity to bring an adequate case, we have people in our society that don't believe in our system.
Yeah, let's break this down a little bit
Okay?
so our listeners understand. I'm charged with a crime. I'm indigent, which means that I do not have the resources to pay for my own defense.
Right.
I'm entitled to have legal counsel, correct?
Right? Yes.
I'm also entitled to have technical support if I need technical support from my legal counsel.
Yes.
So I want to break that down. If I need a ballistics expert, somebody who specializes in
Absolutely.
in guns and bullets and all the things related to it, I just use the term ballistics expert because that's what they use on TV. It's
Right.
pretty good. Okay. So I can petition the court to have a ballistics expert, and the court has to make a decision as to whether I'm entitled to have a ballistics expert.
Yes.
If I need a DNA expert, I'm entitled to have a DNA expert, but I have to file a motion with the court and request it.
Right. So what happens in the instance where you have a judge on a case that doesn't think it's appropriate? It's an appropriate use of the county's dollars to give you an expert. What happens? That's why you have to have an indigent defense system that's going to have their own resources available to them. If an attorney on a case reviews a case and evaluates it and thinks these are the experts that they need, why should they have to go back before a judge to ask for that?
That's the problem we're addressing right now because there are no resources available.
That's right.
So on the technical side, the indigents are still being shorted in their battle with the prosecution.
It can happen, yes.
Okay, we'll take a break for a minute. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Call 1-800-529-8721. That's 1-800-LAW-USA1. And watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. That's Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law. Saturdays at 10 a.m. here on WHPR Detroit Live.
So in your quest to sit on the bench, I'm going to give you a hypothetical. You're sitting on the bench and you recognize that a criminal defendant who's an indigent has lack of access to technology. What are you going to do?
I would probably order experts in that case, or, so I think that judges have an obligation to ensure, as I said, the integrity of the courtroom. So we're required to be fair, we're required to be balanced. We can't do any one thing in the course of a case that would make it appear as if we are giving one side more weight than the other. But if there's something lacking on a case, I believe that I would probably have a sidebar with both of the attorneys and say, I think we have some evidence issues or some access issues, and this needs to be worked out. Something done outside of the hearing of the jury, particularly if there's a jury trial, I would probably be less apt to do something like that, where I would be the sole trier of fact, because I would not want to create reversible error. But I would definitely be concerned if there was an attorney in front of me where there was a glaring need to have some additional experts on a case, and they were not advocating for their client
Well, that's my point. You
to
have,
have that done.
you have the authority as a jurist to order it,
Yes,
and you have the authority, when you order it, to make the county pay
pay
for it.
absolutely.
And I want everyone to understand, well, it's not a separate fund that's available today. As a jurist, as an experienced trial lawyer who recognizes the need for technology in trials, you have the absolute authority to order it.
Yes,
And that's to make sure that there's equal access to justice.
absolutely. We have we have a duty. All lawyers, we have a duty, as I said, to maintain the integrity of our system. And far too often, I hear people talking about how they've been railroaded, or they didn't have a good attorney, or they don't feel like they got a fair shake, or they don't feel like they had an opportunity to be heard. And so we have to change that. There has to be a paradigm shift in terms of the way the public sees our system. If you have money, you see our system differently.
Yeah, if you have money
Yeah,
and you want to retain me, you see it a little differently, because I'm going to tell you how much money you're going to have to spend and what you're going to have to do.
right,
And if you're going to spend it for the defense of your case, I'm not going to talk about any particular case
Sure.
on the air, whether it's a civil case or criminal case, I'll get engaged.
right,
But you're going to have to put up the money. I mean, yesterday, a lady called me about a malpractice case. I told her it was a tough case, had to go out to the experts.
okay,
I gave her the name of the experts. I said, you may write the check to the expert for review, and if we have a case, we have a case. I
Right.
just not going to take that risk today.
right,
But on other cases, I'll take the risk when I believe it's appropriate. Now, in a criminal case, if you come to my office and there's a need for investigation and you hire our firm to represent you, then you certainly are going to be in a position to pay for that investigation. Otherwise,
right,
we're not going to be able to represent you. But on the other hand, if you're an indigent and you can't afford to have these issues resolved, you are entitled to have effective representation. And that's what all of this new commission policy is and regulations about, not only having an attorney there, not, everybody gets concerned because they think that the attorney's a young'un just out of law school, and he or she doesn't know what they're doing. Well,
Right.
they spent 3 years in law school, and they probably worked as an intern in the last year,
right.
and they excuse me, learned a lot as an intern. However, it's not the same as being hands-on.
Right. So we recently have had a report that's been issued. So a report was commissioned by the state, by the Indigent Defense Commission, and the Sixth Amendment Center did a report. It was issued, I want to say, in either April or May of this year, where they really did a deep dive into what's going on, particularly in Wayne County, and they made some recommendations. So I want to just say, again, I'm not involved in the Indigent Defense Commission. I'm just an attorney that's interested in our system as a whole. I did some work in the beginning on getting legislation passed with the Campaign for Justice, but I am not involved in the Indigent Defense Commission at all, just interested in this issue as an attorney. But, so the Sixth Amendment Center has put out a report, and they did do a deep dive, and they looked at what's going on in Wayne County, and they made some recommendations about how we can improve our system. And of course, with that recommendation comes money. It's almost asking to double the amount of appropriations or money that's being set aside for indigent defense. A part of those recommendations talks about technology, having investigators on site, having social workers on site, so that attorneys have the resources that they need to be able to defend people who don't have access to money to pay for their own attorney. So we do have that report out. I think the county is in the process of looking at that report and seeing, what they can and cannot do as it relates to the recommendations that are being made. But it's a big ticket item. It would be a very large ticket item for the county.
And a word to the wise, if you're a young person and you're being charged with a crime, do not enter into a plea without having your parents there to meet with the attorney so you understand the consequences of your plea. Because once you enter into a plea, you've got a conviction on your record, how long do you have to wait before you can get rid of that conviction?
Well, it's going to depend on the kind of conviction that you have. So in the state of Michigan, we do have an expungement law that will allow someone to get one felony expunged as long as they have no more than two misdemeanors or two misdemeanors expunged. You have to wait 5 years from the end of your probation, your parole, or your term of incarceration. So, I mean, that's a minimum of 5 years that someone would have to wait to get, something off their record. And, as I said before, it creates obstacles. It creates obstacles for getting jobs, housing. Some colleges even now are starting to ask whether or not you have a conviction. And I'm not just a conviction, if you have a juvenile adjudication. So they're looking at those issues because for them, they want to ensure that the people, for colleges, they want to make sure that the people that they have on their campus are not going to create a liability issue, aren't going to cause trouble on campus. So more and more people are asking about records and or any involvement with the criminal justice system. One of the things that I do want to say about expungements, even if you get an expungement, there are some employers that are still going to have access, and they're still going to be able to see that. So if you get an expungement and you're interested in law enforcement is still going to be able to see that you had a conviction and that it was expunged.
One of my clients, I handled an expungement for 20 years ago. He's a painting contractor, and he wanted to do work in government buildings. And they went behind the expungement to look at his prior record. And they would not allow him to do work in the building because of his prior record. I had another lady call me last week, and it was an interesting situation. She had 4 misdemeanors, not in Wayne County, and they were not driving offense misdemeanors.
Okay.
They had to do with possession of marijuana
Okay.
in Ann Arbor. Now, the poor woman, she's a teacher now, and the misdemeanors preclude her
Yeah.
teaching.
Well, we'll see what happens. Marijuana is going to be on the ballot. And
Well, my point is, she has to go before the judge and ask the judge to look at that and maybe pardon her or do something else.
Yeah.
Because she's got 4 misdemeanors, she's 2 over the limit to
Right.
get them expunged. So she's gonna have to spend several $1,000s, and she should have a local attorney who's familiar with the
Right.
local process in front of the local judges to
Right.
try and see what she can do to work through the system.
And I'm glad you brought that up when you say local counsel. We were talking earlier and we were talking about public defenders. And I think that sometimes public defenders get a bad rap. I used to, I used to be a public defender. I've had a couple of different jobs over the last 22 years. And so I think that the people that do that work and are willing to do that work and get paid what the county pays them, a lot of them, again, are interested in upholding the integrity of our system, and they work hard, and they do it because they care, and they're not getting paid a lot of money. But in terms of Wayne County, I think that when someone has a court-appointed attorney, they automatically think that they have someone from the defender's office. So our system is set up a little differently. We do have a defender's office in Wayne County, but they only get a little over 25% of the cases. So another 70% of those cases are handled by the private bar, who are getting those cases from court appointment, and so they're being paid under the fee schedule. So just because someone has a court-appointed attorney, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have an attorney that's from the public defender's office. But I do think that those attorneys that do that work, that are in those courts regularly, I think they have a level of expertise that an outsider may not necessarily have, because they know the courthouse, they've practiced in front of the judges, they know the prosecutors, they've been able to develop some relationships, and with anything in life, with relationships comes opportunities to get better deals on behalf of your clients.
Simply stated, get a lawyer who practices in the local area.
Yes.
Because he or she may be in a better position to work with the bench and the prosecutor than an outsider.
Yes.
I know all the attorneys are licensed to practice in the state of Michigan, but not all the attorneys have the relationships in the various communities that are necessary to help the people who need it the most, the clients.
And every court is different. It's so amazing. Every court is different. Even within Wayne County, the district courts are a little different. They have their own, they have their own culture within the courts. And so, You know, if you don't know that culture, you could end up stumbling in a way that might not benefit your client.
There's one exception. When you reach senior status, everybody's pretty nice to you after 50 years of practice. But let's take a break for a minute. We'll be back. We're going to talk about how to get your driver's license back.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? Or just have general legal questions? Call 1-800-529-8721. That's 1-800-LAW-USA1. And watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. That's Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law. Saturdays at 10 a.m. here on WHPR Detroit Live.
I have a problem. Michigan recently passed a law that gives everyone an opportunity to get their driver's license back. My problem is, how do I explain to my clients that there's more to getting the driver's license back than going down to the Secretary of State if I have outstanding warrants?
Okay, so, wow, where to begin? Well, so for the driver's license restoration issue, we currently have a law that's been passed in the state that as of October 31st, 2018, all of those driver's responsibility fees are going to be erased. The state is now allowing people to get those erased earlier in a couple of different circumstances. So if someone was already on a payment plan to repay their driver's responsibility fees, they've likely already received a letter from the state saying that their driver's responsibility fees have been extinguished. For someone who does not want to wait till October 31st, they have the opportunity to go down to any of the workforce development programs. Detroit at Works is one of the programs that is working with people. If they can do 10 hours of workforce development, they can get their driver's responsibility fees waived and then the $125 reinstatement fee waived. But that is not, that's not a silver bullet in terms of getting your driver's license back if you have some other issues that you need to take care of. So I actually do some driver's license restoration at my job, and one of the things that I ask for all of the applicants to do is to get a copy of their certified driving record. They can go down to the Secretary of State and they can get that for $12. And they can look at their driving record and they can see everything that would keep them from getting their driver's license. So for some people, they may have some outstanding fines and costs in some different jurisdictions, some district courts that they need to take care of before they can get their driver's license back. So they can get the driver's responsibility fees taken care of, but then they still have to deal with those tickets. And that means presenting yourself in that jurisdiction to find out what you owe, whether or not you can get a payment plan, whether or not the particular jurisdiction is one that will allow you to do some community service in lieu of fines and costs. But you have to deal with everything that's on your certified driving record before you can get your license back. And then for some people, there's even a larger rub. So if it's been more than 4 years that you've not had your driver's license, you're going to have to apply for your driver's license again by taking a written test and a road test.
Okay, let's break this down a little
Yep.
bit.
I know I just gave a lot of information.
You sure did, and I just love to listen to you. I understand it, but I want to break it down a little bit.
Okay.
So here I am, I'm out here. I lost my license, financial responsibility, because I had an accident, had no insurance. They got a judgment against me.
Yes. Oh, yes. That's different than what I just talked about. So how do
Yeah.
you deal with that?
That's right, I give you the hard one to
Yeah. Oh,
start
no,
with.
that's fine.
Well, because it's an important one.
Right.
Because I let my son drive my car, I have no insurance, he got in an accident, I own the car, I'm responsible under the law, we got a judgment against us, I'm not driving, he's not driving, legally.
Right. So if you get a judgment entered against you, what you're likely going to end up having is a financial responsibility hold on your driver's license. And that is unless and until you resolve the judgment or the amount of money that now the courts say you owe to the other party. It may be the insurance company or the other party. I've seen people contact me with upwards to $80,000 that they owe, and they have a financial responsibility hold. So there are a couple of ways that that can be handled. One is to enter into an installment payment plan. So an installment payment plan can be entered into with the creditor or with the person that you owe the judgment to. You can get a clearance from the court. You will be able to contact the state to get a financial responsibility license. So it's not going to be a regular license like everybody else has, but you would be able to get a license so that you can drive your car, as long as you're making your installment payment plans. And then you'll also be required to get what's called an SR22 insurance, and that's like a bond. It's like an insurance bond. And you'll have to maintain that for the time that you have this financial responsibility debt that you have to pay back. The other alternative could be bankruptcy. And so I've talked to clients about filing for bankruptcy so that they can get that debt extinguished, and then they can go back and get their driver's license because they have that financial responsibility hold. So there are a couple of different ways that you can handle that. But as long as that judgment is still out there, not being paid in any way, shape, or form, a person or a driver could be foreclosed from getting their driver's license.
Okay, now I'm going to give you the other example we were going to talk about today.
Okay?
She's got a mean left hook. I have to watch out for her.
Oh, it's okay.
Okay, here's the other situation. I want to get my license back, and I've got 9 outstanding warrants. Do I have to resolve all 9 of them before I get my license back?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I use 9 because I know people who've got
It
15
happens.
out there.
It happens, and in several different jurisdictions. So I suggest that, it's like, how do you eat an elephant, right? One forkful at a time. So you have to go to the jurisdiction that you owe the least amount to. Take care of that, work that out. Save up your money, go to the next jurisdiction. I know that people are worried about presenting themselves before the court and being locked up. And I do understand that fear, but the only way to resolve it is to meet it head on. I also suggest, not going to court with no money in your pocket. Because, that's the worst thing possible, to show up in court. You've had something outstanding for 8 years. I've seen people 8-10 years where they've had these warrants out. They haven't resolved them, and they show up in court and they have $0. You have to have something to show as a good faith effort, particularly if you're asking for a payment plan, that you are serious about meeting this obligation, because driving is a privilege. It's not a right. And so, I always suggest to all of my clients, I sometimes I have to tell them I don't tell them what they want to hear a lot of times, but I tell them what they need to know. And that is that you've got to meet this head on. Because in this state, we got to have cars. We don't have mass transit. So if you're trying to get your kids back and forth to school, if you're trying to get back and forth to work, you almost need a vehicle. You really do.
Okay, I have to interject here and ask you a question. So I entered into an installment agreement to pay off my tickets. Does that make me eligible once I enter into the installment agreement to go down and get my license reinstated?
Some courts will give you a clearance while you're paying the installment plan, and then you can go down and you can pay your reinstatement fee, and you can get your driver's license. But the moment that you default on that installment plan, you could get your license taken again.
And the flip side of it is, if you don't have that clearance and you're on the installment and you get caught driving and you don't have a license reinstated,
It's another ticket.
worse, you can get 90 days in jail for it.
Yes. Yes.
And these are not expungible. Moving violations aren't expungible.
They absolutely are not. Traffic violations are not expungible. And it's interesting because some of these violations are actually misdemeanors, as you just discussed. So we have this, driving without a license can be a misdemeanor. And so that is something that can keep someone from getting an expungement if they have too many of those and just one felony. It can be really heartbreaking when you're trying to work with people to get back on their feet, the way all of these different aspects of our lives are interconnected, and how they can impact our ability to move forward.
And I don't want anybody to be delusional out there. In other words, think they're out in the fairy godmother land. If you got a bunch of parking tickets out there,
Yes.
they issue warrants for those just like anything else, and they can suspend
Your
your
license.
license. And if your license gets suspended, it affects you across
Yes.
the board.
And so for the parking tickets, I just had a gentleman the other day. So for the parking tickets, the way that the city of Detroit handles the parking tickets is if you want a hearing, you have to post a bond in the amount of the tickets that you owe. So if you're not successful, the city gets their money. You know, so I had a conversation with a gentleman the other day, and he said, well, why? Why do I said, you have to pay a bond. That's how the system works. If you want to have a hearing on the tickets, if you don't agree with the tickets, you got to pay the bond. You have to post a bond first in the amount of what you owe, and then if you're successful, you'll get your money back. You know, and his point to me was, well, if I had the money, I would go ahead and pay the tickets. Touche.
I understand, but you can go down there and enter into a payment
Payment plan.
program, and that payment plan, if it's for parking tickets, more likely than not, is the type of payment plan that would not preclude you from getting your license
Right.
reinstated. Now, when the legislature passed the legislation for the reinstatement coming October 31st, it was a wonderful opportunity for people to get back on their feet who had
Yes.
outstanding tickets.
Yes.
This issue about going down and doing community service raises another flag. A lot of folks can't do community service because they're disabled.
So there have to be other options, and so I can't speak for the judges that are sitting in the various district courts in terms of, you know, how they'll rule. There are some that have waived some of the fines and costs as appropriate. There's some that are statutory that can't be waived. You know, they've reduced some of the interest, waived some of the warrant fees that have been associated to reduce the amount that's owed. But I guess really the bottom line is that someone that has a number of tickets that wants to get their driver's license back, at the end of the day, they're likely going to have to pay something.
I don't want our listeners to be confused, though.
Okay?
If your license is suspended because you've been driving under the influence of narcotics or alcohol, this law does not stop the suspension.
That's absolutely right. That is a totally different process. And so in that case, if someone is a habitual, if their license isn't reinstated after they've served their suspension, and you can see that on your certified driving record, you likely have to go before an administrative hearing body at the Secretary of State in order to get your driver's license back. And that is a large undertaking in and of itself. You know, having to prove by clear and convincing evidence that you've been substance use free for a year, and there are a lot of things that go along with that.
But we did have some new legislation passed a couple of years ago that liberalized, I'm using the word liberalized.
I know, I don't like the word, I don't like the use of the word liberal, but it's okay.
Okay, well, it made it easier for a person who had a prior habitual conviction, in other words, 2 OUIs, to get their license back.
Yes.
It's a process.
It is a process. There's a substance use evaluation that usually costs about $300. You have to go in and have that done. You get a 10-panel drug screen. That's a part of that process as well. That's presented to the hearing officer. You have to have at least 3 letters, notarized letters from people who know you, your use of substances or alcohol, the last time you used, your treatment history. You know, I suggest to most people what the court is looking for, what the hearing officer is looking for, is that you've been involved in some form of treatment plan, some commitment to your sobriety. They're going to want to know your past and current involvement with the treatment plan, whether or not you're going to NA or AA. And so you have to present all of that to the hearing officer, because the burden is on the person who wants their privileges back to prove by clear and convincing evidence that they are substance free and that they're going to be able to be on the road safely.
Well, you brought up an interesting point, and a proof of what you're doing. It cuts across the board. If you've made mistakes and you want to get your license back, or you made mistakes and you want an expungement, you have to become engaged in the
process.
in the process and in the community.
Yes.
Now, we're going to take a break for a minute. We're going to talk about expungement when we come back.
Are you in legal trouble? Are you in need of legal advice? or just have general legal questions? Call 1-800-529-8721. That's 1-800-LAW-USA1. And watch Law Power Hour and get your questions answered by experienced attorneys who are experts in their field. That's Law Power Hour, hosted by Barry Keller, attorney at law. Saturdays at 10 a.m. here on WHPR Detroit Live.
Now, I brought up this expungement issue again because you are one of the leading attorneys working on a volunteer basis in expungement that I know. And I think it's wonderful that you have the sensitivity to helping people get back on their feet.
Well, I appreciate that. So, I see expungement as a path to success in our community. I would like for us to have some conversations about what happens on the front end, but I know that's a different show. But in terms of expungements in our state, you have an opportunity, as I indicated earlier, to have an expungement if you only have one felony and no more than 2 misdemeanors. So you can get the felony expunged, or you can get 2 misdemeanors expunged. And there are certain types of cases that cannot be expunged. There's some sex crimes that cannot be expunged, and some life felonies that can be expunged. But in terms of getting an expungement, a person would qualify for an expungement if it has been more than 5 years from the imposition of their sentence, their release from prison, or their release from probation or parole. And, in order to get an expungement, when you look at how much it actually costs, it doesn't really cost more than about $100 to get your expungement done.
Right, because you have to get your fingerprints.
Right, you have to get your fingerprint cards done. That could run about $7, $12. You have to get certified copies of your order of conviction. So you'll go down to your local court where your case was heard, and you'll pay for your certified copies. The first page is usually $2, and then, however many pages after that, you'll pay for that. And then there's a $50 check that goes to the state of Michigan so that they can do the further background check to make sure that you don't have any other convictions in any other states, to do a true clearance to make sure that you don't have any other convictions that will preclude you from getting an expungement. And so really, all in all, if you're working with any of the offices or any of the agencies throughout our state that are doing expungements, it doesn't cost more than $100 to get that done.
Why is it really important to get your record expunged?
Oh, any number of things. Housing. I deal with people in my practice now who have they've been in prison, they're home, they're disabled. Some of them are disabled, or they have limited income, and they're trying to get into public housing, and they can't get into public housing because they have a conviction on their record. Employment is another instance where it has an impact. And then the other thing is just getting that albatross from around your neck.
Well, there's so many obstacles facing returning citizens,
Yes.
and we could spend hours, days, and weeks talking about all the obstacles facing returning citizens.
Right.
But the expungement is one way to assist returning citizens. It's unfortunate that we have to wait 5 years.
Yes.
And I really don't like the idea, and I said, and I hesitate to say, I wish it was 2 years.
Then the other thing is this. So there are people who, I just talked to a gentleman the other day. He has not, he had an offense from 1989. He's not been in any other trouble. And he's having difficulty maintaining a job. So, in that regard, perhaps we could, or our legislators could look at, after a certain amount of time, those things dropping off your record. That would be helpful too, because I do see a lot of people who may have made some bad choices when they were younger, but they've gotten their life together, and they haven't had any other contact with the criminal justice system, but they continue to have difficulty moving forward.
As you pointed out, marijuana may become legal.
And
But
it
the
may
point
be
is,
on the ballot.
I can't begin to tell you how many times I've participated in an expungement fair, and people have this crime, possession of
Possession.
marijuana,
Yeah,
and they've lost a lot of privileges because of this, and they've had to have subservient, lower-paying jobs.
yes.
It's affected their housing, affected their opportunity to get student loans, affected their opportunity to go to school, have an effective life. It's not right.
So, there's an opportunity there. If marijuana is passed in our state, there's an opportunity there to maybe go back and look at some of those possessions and figure out how we now deal with that. I mean, we did it with prohibition with alcohol, right? So maybe there's an opportunity to open some doors for those people as well.
I want our listeners to understand that we're not taking a position on the
Yes, we are
legality
not.
of marijuana. I want you to understand that, because as you've heard on my show before, and Regina, I'm sure you'll agree with me, it's one of those silent but deadly situations, because it's very difficult to detect if a person's driving under the influence of drugs as
Right.
compared to the odor that's eminent when you stop someone and they open their mouth and they've been drinking.
Right.
So we're not proponents, we're just saying, if the law is passed, we'll respect the law.
Absolutely. If the law is passed, I will respect the law.
But it's a serious
is.
issue.
It is. And there's still probably some work to be done in that area as we look at how the interplay between recreational use and what that means for people who are driving cars.
And the other thing is, when we get back to the expungement issue, we have to get these expungement laws broadened. One felony should be 2 felonies. And I know how you feel about that, because 1 felony's not enough, is it?
Well, I think that when we look at the circumstances and when we're looking at expungements, if it is an offense where it was one occasion but there were multiple convictions.
That's my point.
Yes. Yes, so when there's that one offense but multiple convictions, so you may have a situation where you committed a crime and there was a gun present, so you're charged with the gun and you're also charged with the crime. That really is one instance, and so that may be an area where there could be some movement as it relates to expungements, looking at a string of events or circumstances that really are out of one occurrence.
Yeah, that's the point, and so many times when we look at a record, we'll see 2 convictions, 1 incident, as you just pointed out, no opportunity for expungement
Right.
because of 2 convictions. That's not right.
Right.
It's not fair.
Right.
So tell us a little bit about your campaign before we wrap up.
Okay, well, my name is Regina Thomas, and I am asking for the privilege to serve Wayne County as one of its next Wayne County Circuit Court judges. There are currently 3 open seats, and as I said earlier, I'm hoping to earn the support of voters in Wayne County to sit on the bench. I will not be on the primary. I will be on the general election ballot, which is November 7th. So for people who are interested in voting for judges, judges are nonpartisan. That means we don't belong to either party, Democratic or Republican. If you're voting for judges, if you vote straight ticket, you're not voting for the judges. So in most cases, you'll have to go probably down to the bottom of your ballot and flip it over and look for the nonpartisan section to find the judges. Again, my name is Regina Thomas, running for Wayne County Circuit Court Judge, and my website is reginathomasforjudge.com, so you can find out more about me there.
When you're voting, one of the most important parts of the ballot is always overlooked. It's the nonpartisan judiciary portion of the ballot. You're not going to go in front of a member of the legislature if
Right.
you're charged with a crime. You're not going to go in front of a member of the legislature if you want to have your civil rights protected, nor are you going to go in front of a member of the legislature if you need a trial and you've been injured. You're going to go in front of a member of the judiciary who is going to be your trial judge. So go to the nonpartisan part of the ballot.
Yes, thank you for
And
that.
I'm serious
I
about
know,
that.
I'm pushing it. I'm trying to raise the consciousness
No, 'cause-
of the electorate because judges have more of an impact in our everyday lives than any other elected official.
Absolutely, and I feel the same way about United States senators having more of an impact than the President of the United States.
Yes, yes.
I feel very strongly about that. People seem to forget these facts when they go to vote. So look at the nonpartisan part and vote for Regina Thomas. I'm asking you to support her.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
You know, no one called in today, so I hope you all heard the show. So we look forward to hearing from you next week. Thank you.